some ways it was classic Donald Trump, all of the old sort of foes and enemies. But to hear him bring it all together in this context, essentially to go from being charged to segueing into a campaign rally, and to hear a former and possibly future president essentially saying that the entire FBI is corrupt, gun-toting FBI agents. In some ways, this is America's worst nightmare, to have two institutions that Americans have always valued, the presidency and the FBI, and to have one former president saying that the other institution is corrupt is I think, a really black day for America.
Let's bring in John Barron, the host of Planet America. John, what did you make of what former President Trump had to say just a few hours ago? He was appearing in a Miami court pleading not guilty to these 37 federal criminal charges.
Karina, it was the usual litany of grievances from former President Trump. An important fact that he overlooks and that we must understand is that this isn't simply about the fact that he took some documents with him when he hurriedly left the White House amid all of the scandal and the violence of Inauguration month in January of 2021. It is that he repeatedly stonewalled and lied to the FBI and the National Archives about his possession of highly classified information that we now know, according to these indictments, including America's nuclear secrets, which in some cases were stored in archive boxes stacked in toilets, showers, and the ballroom at Mar-a-Lago, a public place for America's greatest secrets. And the fact that Trump apparently ordered his subordinates to shuffle these papers around, move them from one place to another, hand over some but not most of the most sensitive of these documents, and repeatedly lied about it. So it isn't just the fact that he had these documents, which he was not entitled to take from the White House, but that wasn't such a big deal. It was the fact that he covered it up and he lied about it again and again.
And John, further to that, he's been charged over the documents that he kept, not the 15 boxes that he returned to authorities.
Precisely so, which is why it's a very different case to former Vice President Mike Pence having classified documents in his possession, or the investigation into former Vice President, now President Joe Biden, who had some still classified documents in his possession at his home in Delaware and at the University of Pennsylvania, where he had a think tank while he was out of government briefly. In all of those cases, there was no attempt to cover it up. There's no obstruction. The National Archives, which takes possession of all presidential papers, every bit of paper produced by and for the President of the United States, belongs to the United States government, not that individual president. In many cases, they can get photocopies or scans of these things to put in their memoirs, for their own references, for their own libraries and so on. That's no big deal. But when these things are top secret and are being mishandled in this way, that's where you fall foul of the Espionage Act of the United States, which is where Donald Trump is today.
John Lyons? In terms of those documents and the fact that some were returned, the fact that Donald Trump is saying that this is what many presidents have done, that's being fact-checked on the run, isn't it?
Look, some presidents have taken documents with them, obviously. Joe Biden's a case in point, but as a former vice president. But the difference here, I think the real problem Donald Trump has here is that he's being charged with having lied to federal officers, and his assistant also is in trouble at having to sort of conspired to hide and to get these out of the way. And you hear some of the references in that speech. I mean, he talked about Joe Biden and his documents were found in Chinatown, and then Chinatown means that the Chinese probably had a look at it. There was a lot of unhinged stuff in there for Trump, but I think Donald Trump's real problem in the end is that if you lie to an organisation like the FBI, Americans cherish the FBI. How many TV series and movies have we seen about the FBI as heroes? Yet here is a former president having basically said to them, lied to them according to the charges. So in a way, I think that's going to be his real weakness. But of course, like red meat to the base, you see the effect it has on some of his supporters. It makes them more determined. And unfortunately, the danger is, as we saw in the storming of the Capitol, America could at any point start to have these divisions in the streets. I think that's the big fear.
And there was a fear that there could be some 50,000 people take to the streets in Miami today when he appeared in court. That didn't transpire. There was something like about 5,000 people, and on the whole, it seemed to be relatively peaceful. So some of those worst fears didn't transpire.
Fortunately, but of course we know the gun problem in America, and again the bizarre nature of that thing we've just watched. This is a man who is beholden to the NRA, to the gun lobby, yet he's criticising the gun-toting FBI for coming to his place. But hopefully enough Americans realise that taking to the streets is not the answer.
John Barron, this has been a boon for Donald Trump as he continues his re-election campaign. His popularity has surged, his fundraising activities have gone up. In fact, this event that's being held at his golf course is expected to raise $2 million US.
Yes, Donald Trump has repeatedly found ways of first monetising running for president in 2016 when he didn't really expect to become president. But then when he did become president, he monetised the presidency, making more and more money, including for things like the Trump Hotel just down the road from the White House, where a lot of foreign dignitaries paid a lot of money to stay in Trump's hotel. Now, of course, he's finding a way to monetise being a defendant in a series of legal indictments. And Donald Trump is overwhelmingly the front runner to become the Republican Party's presidential nominee again next year to take on, presumably, President Joe Biden. But Republicans who still support Donald Trump, they have to ponder the fact that their presidential nominee could be in jail by Election Day next year. Now, bizarrely enough, that wouldn't stop him from being elected president or taking the oath of office. Hypothetically, Donald Trump could serve as president from behind bars. But whether voters have pause for thought about that possibility, whether they decide, in fact, it's time to move on from this scandal-plagued and highly irregular political figure, that remains to be seen in the months ahead.
Yeah, it's extraordinary that set of circumstances could play out. The special counsel, Jack Smith, told the court today it would be a speedy trial, so it could start in as soon as 70 days. Is that right?
That is the intention of the prosecution. The defence has every incentive, Karina, to slow this down. Ideally, from Donald Trump's defence point of view, to slow it down beyond next year's election, when he could possibly, if he were to be president at that point, he could, some lawyers think, he could self-pardon, or he could briefly hand over power to his then vice president, who could then pardon him and then reinstate him as well. But yes, it's in these sorts of cases, you can tie it up in all sorts of procedural wrangling. There is, of course, the other case in New York City involving the hush money payments to former adult actress Stormy Daniels, which is due to go to court in March next year. So that may well reach a conclusion before the election. And there's other charges relating to that January 6th attack in Washington, D.C. and allegations of attempted election fraud in the state of Georgia by President Trump, which we're likely to see an indictment on from a grand jury in the next month as well. So there are all these quite serious legal matters swirling around Donald Trump, which, in the case that we're currently seeing now, could see him heading to jail rather than the White House, or, bizarrely enough, heading to both.
Yeah, Karina, the point John Barron just makes is true and horrific when you think about it, that one of the largest democracies in the world faces the prospect of having a leading candidate from behind jail. I mean, what does this do to the notion of stability and to democracy and to transparency in the United States, to see how far their political process has been debauched through all of this? We thought the Capitol riots was a low point for democracy. If this keeps on the current trajectory, I think we're heading for an even lower point and a more dangerous point in a deeply divided and bitter society.
How do you combat accusations of partisanship here? The Justice Department's pursuing this case. The Attorney General, Merrick Garland, is appointed by President Joe Biden, whose main rival is Donald Trump at this stage for the presidency. I mean, Donald Trump this morning reiterating, saying the process is rigged and this is a witch hunt.
Well, either people believe in the processes, the democratic processes, or they don't. The United States, of course, appoints High Court, Supreme Court judges, etc. But Do they believe in their institutions or not? There's enough pride surely in the FBI and some of these organisations for enough people to want to adhere to the letter of the law. Has he broken the law? Has he lied to federal officers? That's a pretty clear, open and cut case. And if he has, then obviously he should wear the consequences of that.
John Barron, you were talking earlier about the sensitivity of the documents that have been found in Donald Trump's possessions. How do you expect this trial to play out, given the sensitive nature of the intelligence that he had?
Well, Karina, 17 of the more than 100 classified documents are in the highest possible top secret classification. We will never know precisely what is in them. They will not appear in court. The special counsel, Jack Smith, has alluded to the general nature of what they refer to in terms of war planning, an American attack on Iran, we understand. Also, America's plans for a nuclear response if it is the victim of a first strike. We also know, just very vaguely, that some of the top secret intelligence relates to America's closest allies. So there's potentially implications for Australia's national security in all of this. And bear in mind, even though nobody is alleging that Donald Trump is a spy, he is charged under the Espionage Act, but it is because he would make it very, very easy for a spy in his actions, in his reckless handling of these documents, being put in a shower cubicle, a lavatory, a ballroom, being shuffled around golf clubs and hotel resorts, where, frankly, if the Chinese, the Russian, the Iranian, or the North Korean intelligence agencies haven't infiltrated the cleaning staff at Mar-a-Lago or Bedminster Golf Course or one of the other Trump properties where these documents were stored, they're probably not doing their job correctly. And we also know from this indictment that Donald Trump was showing some of these sensitive and classified documents to people that did not have any right to see them, did not have any security clearance. So it is recklessness which may see him convicted, may well see him convicted, but it also may well have some Republican voters thinking, well, this guy is not really treating our top secrets with the deference that they deserve.